Well, hey, friends, my name is Andrea. This is Journals for Breakfast. You're so welcome here. So, this week's video, we are going to be talking about coping mechanisms and how to kind of identify the ones that we've outgrown and how to replace them. Um, it's funny that this video has popped into my mind as it has, but it was just an absolutely crystal clear message that I received that I needed to just share this experience and this story. I've had a very emotional week, and that definitely started this conversation in my mind. And as I journaled through it in the last few days, I realized that this is exactly why I started a journaling channel to share some of this. And I hope that this video finds exactly who needed to see it today. So, we're going to talk about recognizing coping mechanisms that maybe are no longer serving us, that we've either outgrown or, yeah, that just aren't serving us anymore. And I'm going to share some information, a few stories in the beginning here. And I'm just going to talk to you face to face like I do. And then I'll show you how I kind of got myself out of the trap of a coping mechanism this week that I know does not serve me, and I kind of stepped one toe into it and then got out of it quickly because my awareness about it is so great now. And how I used a tarot card and some journaling to work my way through it. And so I'm going to switch gears to an overhead in a bit, and I am going to put together a collage based on that tarot pull. A viewer asked me if I would do some of that here, show how I create collage that are inspired by tarot pulls. And so, if you're more interested in just collage and hearing a little bit about that tarot pull and its reading and its meaning, you can just fast forward this to when you see the camera go to the overhead. But as long as it's just me here talking to you, I'm just sharing some background. I want to say first and foremost that I'm going to share a couple of coping mechanisms that I've used and have outgrown or stopped serving me. And they are no condemnation of that coping mechanism. If what I mention is something that actually is still serving you, that is great. We're all on a different path. And there is no black and white in this world. There is no right or wrong in this world. There are variations of everything. And so, what I'm just sharing with you is two very specific coping mechanisms that just lost their value for me personally, but it doesn't make them invaluable. Okay. So the first one I've actually shared with you guys here in our video a few weeks ago. We were talking about finding your authenticity and how challenging actually that really is on an innate human level, how tricky it is to break away from the crowd and the norm and just be authentic. And I mentioned in that video that one of the least authentic things that I had been doing consistently throughout my life was drinking alcohol. But today's video, I'm going to mention that alcohol for me was a coping mechanism. And to be perfectly honest with you, it worked pretty well for a long time. It helped me overcome social anxiety. It led me to feel connected to the people that I was drinking with. And I'm talking about connecting with some girlfriends at 5 o'clock for a glass of wine. I'm not talking about hard alcohol abuse and things like that. Just that action felt very connected to me. And over time, it started to work against me. It stopped serving me rather than it being a way for me to kind of detach and maybe get a little bit of a buzz or a little bit high. It started being a place where I was hiding, where I was going to alcohol to not detach, but to disappear, to just not face what was really going on in my world and in my heart. And ultimately, it also physiologically started to work against me. It was robbing me of valuable sleep. It was taxing my internal organs. I felt like I was always in healing mode. This body just couldn't get a break from the toxin that was alcohol in my body. And so, yeah, it really started to work against me. And that was one of the first coping mechanisms that I realized no longer served me and I needed to step away from. But in more recent years, I spotted one that was pretty interesting to me, came as a little bit of surprise to me. And it starts a couple of years ago when our home flooded. And I sent out in the first 24 to 40 hours of the flood, I sent out a bunch of texts. Obviously, some were just letting my staff know that we were going to be closing the studio for a couple of days. Michael and I were in triage over here trying to save our house. I mean, some of them made sense, right? But I sent texts out to a lot of people that my house had flooded. Um, and then I noticed something, that some of the responses I got really either hurt my feelings or angered me. I felt just like, what? How is that your response to this? Do you not get what's going on here? And I realized a few days into this flood that I needed to be careful about my intention in texting people about something that was very personal and emotional to me at that time. What was it specifically that I wanted them to give back from that text? Because I wasn't getting it. And I realized that I was asking people to feel a pain I was feeling that, frankly, they cannot feel. If they have not been through the same scenario, they can't possibly know how Michael and I felt in those early days. So I was asking something kind of unfair of them in a way, because yeah, I was asking them to connect with the deep emotion that I was feeling when it's an experience they have no background in and no connection to. I felt like I was sort of setting people up for failure by sending out these lures, these texts, looking for something specific to come back from it. And so it really caused me to pause at that time and consider again my motivations. What was I really looking for in sending those texts? And I will refer to those texts where what I was looking for, by the way, was validation for my pain. We were in an incredible amount of pain, and I needed, for some reason, outward resources, other people validating that I felt that bad in that moment. And that was the motivation. That's what I was looking for. And so, and I wasn't getting it. Why would I? That's an odd thing. But I call that type of texting that I was doing, I call that phishing. And you're going to hear me refer to that a few times throughout this video. I was going out to a pond and throwing in a line and seeing what I could reel in. But the thing is that when you go out to a pond to go fishing, you have no idea what's going to come back. Is it going to be a bass? Is it going to be a brim? Is it going to be a sunfish? There's no way to tell. So there's no control in it whatsoever, right? And I'm throwing that fishing line out into that pond. Really, in my heart, what I'm seeking is validation for how hurt I feel in that moment. And that's asking a lot of those fish to know exactly which one needs to bite and exactly which way. So I became aware of this during the flood, and I paid attention to my tendency when I feel uncomfortable to pick up that phone and text somebody immediately about what I'm feeling and look for some validation for it. And a year after the flood, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I had to be really careful about the cancer announcement. I had lost a the person who probably was closest to me in the world to cancer a year before the flood. So now a year after the flood, I get diagnosed with cancer. And I knew from my own experience with that when we went to announce cancer, that we were going to have to be very compassionate and understand that that announcement was going to have a really strong emotional impact on everyone that was close to us. It isn't just about you. So when you tell your friends this, they're going to cry too. This is happening to them also. Cancer impacts everyone. And so I felt like, good job, Andrea. Growth Andrea understands this. She's been through this. She understood this because when my dear friend told me I went into about her cancer, I went into a great state of mourning and grief immediately. It had a huge impact on me. So I understood. Good, we've grown. As I move into the cancer treatments, one of the things that happens is I lost my hair. And I haven't talked about it a whole lot here because it is something that I did need to grow through and go through on my own to some degree. But in the early days of my hair loss, I don't really honestly remember if I was fishing, if I threw the line out and tried to get some validation for how hurt and lost I was at the experience of waking up and seeing a complete stranger in my mirror, or if it was in response to people genuinely asking, how are you feeling? How are you doing about your hair loss? Maybe people asked. I don't know. I honestly don't remember. But I very much remember just pouring my heart out via text, whether it was solicited or not, about how devastating this experience was at this time. I had put towels over all the mirrors in the house. I could not handle my own reflection. It was so jarring to see a complete stranger. I had no I had no equipment to deal with this yet, you know, and I tried to convey that in some of these texts. And I realized very quickly, we were right back to the first week of the flood. You're asking people, I was asking people to relate to emotions that they simply can't. They've never been there. They can only imagine what it might be. They can try to be sympathetic, but they're just not going to grasp it on the level that you are truly feeling it for yourself. And I felt like once again, I was kind of fishing in that pond and then getting mad at the largemouth bass for catching that line when what I really wanted was a sunfish. I mean, you can't ask that of the pond, right? So I felt that happening inside of me and knew that this is a coping mechanism you've tried before, you've recognized does not work terribly well for you. This looking for validation for your feelings from external resources is not healthy for you. Let's get down to the core of why it's happening. But I'll tell you something else that happened is that a couple of responses were so inappropriate that they did a little damage. And I don't have condemnation for those people that gave me those responses. What I recognized is that they were people I should not have attempted to find that validation from to begin with. And when you go fishing in ponds in Florida, you need to be careful because there are gators here. And yeah, you might pull in nothing, which might feel frustrating. And you might pull in a sunfish when you wanted a bass, but you might pull in a gator and lose your right arm too. You've got to be cautious. And wow, did I learn in the midst of that cancer, if you aren't ready for any response by sending out these lures, these fishing lines, then don't send out the line. Because some responses that came back were really startlingly hurtful. And yeah, so I had to just become really aware of that as a coping mechanism for me, that looking for outward validation. What did I do about it? I journaled about it. Why do you need someone else to tell you that it's okay to be hurt in the middle of a flood? Why do you need someone else to be in as much pain as you in any given painful moment? Why can't we just sit with this pain and this discomfort and ride it out and see what it brings for us? And what I started to do was convert looking for validation outward and started prayer and meditation and finding a way to validate it for myself if it was needed, but mostly to just learn to sit with it and just be uncomfortable. It's okay. And ride that wave, that uncomfortable wave for a day or two and do some writing. What is the most petulant part of this that I feel? What's the smallest emotion here? What's the emotion that I feel in this that I'm most embarrassed about? Like, I don't want to tell anybody that I feel this way about this. Do I feel envious? Do I feel angry? Do I feel vengeful? You know, those ones we don't want to tell anybody about. They're there. They're there for all of us. Those are human emotions and we're human beings. So get them out on paper. And then I could take a breath and allow myself to be a human being and have those small emotions, but then really get to the root of them. What are those really based in too? And this whole process really begins for me with pen and paper. It begins with a journal. It doesn't work with a text fished out to a random pond and hope somebody comes back and validates. It works when I get out pen and paper and start writing down for myself what the core of these are. Basically, I have such an awareness of it that I feel like I've moved past that fishing as a coping mechanism. But I had a really emotional week this week. Something came up that just blew, you feel so grounded some days. You just are like, I have got this. I am rocking this thing called life. And then your foundation just explodes beneath you. That is exactly what happened. Out of left field, came an experience. And what I'll say about it, I'm going to maintain the privacy of the person involved for a number of reasons. One is he does not watch this channel. I'm not worried about him seeing this and hearing this, but it is his story to share, not mine. But a friend made a decision a few months ago, a choice that, frankly, he was very excited about and felt like was his right and something that was going to bring a lot of joy to his life. And I saw it in a very different way. It seemed very scary to me. It seemed desperate to me. It felt incredibly risky. And I personally felt like the root of it needed to be addressed before the action was taken. And so I had a very different response to his choice, I think, than he even expected. But months have gone by. I've done a lot of journaling about that and recognized that that's my story with that action, not his or anyone else's. And so I need to keep that about me. I'm not right about that. I'm not wrong about that. It's just my response to that choice. And this week, I saw the results of that choice, and it was a gut punch. It just drew up all of that stuff from the original announcement about this. That all came flooding back. But also, I found that I had a funny, deep envy that kicked in. And envy is an emotion I'm not proud of and I don't adore, but I do allow because I am a human being. And I think it is an incredibly natural part of the human story. But with envy, what I always have to get to is how much of it is based in truth. And the answer almost always is none. So, what I do with envy is I let it wash over me. It does not feel good. I don't like that emotion. And I often cry when I'm feeling envious. I feel hurt, like my feelings are hurt when I feel envious. And so it is tearful for me. I shed a lot of tears in the early hours of a wash of envy. But the next thing that I do is, well, let me clarify. The next thing that I think to do is text someone, go fishing, tell them about this terrible situation and this unfairness of this world, and get some validation for this ugly, yucky feeling that I am harboring. And this time around, I spotted it right away. I felt my thumb hovering over that message button. And so I did a little shopping, meaning I looked at the names that I might text about this. And I tried to be conscientious about that might be a gator. That probably will just be an empty pond. You're not going to come back with anything. And I chose a pond to fish into carefully and thought probably they won't get it, but this of the people I know, they might. I threw a lure in and I came back empty. They definitely did not grasp what I was feeling. And they also changed the subject immediately, which in fact is good because I wasn't going to get what I needed out of that pond. So I also carried on with their changed subject and just moved on. So my initial reaction was to go to a coping mechanism that I already know is not going to work, but it was short lived. And I was able to instead get the word envy written down and take a look at the truth of it. Um, why do you think you feel envious? Because he could afford to do something that I can't afford to do. He has a freedom that I don't have. He's single and he can make choices that I would are choices that I would choose to consult with my husband about. And I think that the choice that he made is one that my husband would really work hard to talk me out of. So I don't feel like I have the freedom to make the same choice that he made. So, yeah, those create that, don't they? Feeling poor, like you have less than someone else, or feeling stuck, without freedom. And then I asked, are either of these things true? Because the truth is that if I wanted to take a loan against my home, I could, and I could do this thing that they did. And the truth is that I can do whatever I want to do in this world. Even if my husband doesn't adore the choice, he'll stand by me in the things that I do, assuming that they aren't harmful. So neither of the two things that were envy based actually turned out to be true anyway, did they? And journaling is how I got there, not fishing, not validation from a friend. In fact, the few people I've spoken to about this person's choice, his choice, have actually had very different opinions than mine about it. They've felt that it's empowering and delightful. I find it to be completely the opposite. So I'm not going to get that support from outward resources anyway. Um, so how did I spot it? Well, I felt my thumb hovering. I knew what I was doing, right? I knew I'd taken that fishing line down to that pond, but I was careful. I said, some of these ponds around here have gators. I've never seen a gator in this pond, so I'm going to at least try this one. And then still didn't get what I needed. So switch gears to what we do. What do we do here? We journal, got out pen and paper. But the other thing that I did was pull out a tarot deck and pull a card. And in this particular case, I was very specific about what I was asking kind of the universe in that moment. And I was asking for relief from this set of emotion, this weight. Um, yeah. And so I pulled a card. And so we're going to go into an overhead and I'm going to show you the card that I pulled and how it kind of prompted me through this journey over the next 24 hours to find some peace with it and move on. And I'm going to do a collage that is inspired by the card. And we'll talk a little bit about the meaning of this card and then just kind of how I use tarot as guidance in journaling in general. So we're going to move to an overhead. If you've stuck around this long, thanks for hearing me out. And I would love to hear in the comments if you have spotted coping mechanisms in your life that you realized don't serve. And as comfortable as they might seem on the surface, when we get real about the disservice that they do to us, even though it's so hard to break away from them that you have, you can just put yeah, I get you, girl, and to say that you've been there too, if you'd like to share in any way. All right, let's go to an overhead. Okay, so the tarot deck I decided to pull from this week when I was feeling so much hurt. Again, I was feeling an emotion I don't like, which is envy. I had journaled a bit about it, and I want to share with you a YouTube channel that some of you may know about and some of you may not. It is Lee Harris. I'm going to link his January video in the description box below, and I highly encourage that you take a look at the Lee Harris offerings. And Lee Harris, in his January update, mentioned that when we find ourselves feeling envy or jealousy, it is a sign of self abandonment. And man, did that really stick with me. I came home and wrote it down. And at the time, I was not dealing with this emotional situation. I was having a wonderful week Monday. Everything was going great. This thing kicks in, I think, Tuesday, late afternoon. So I'd written down self abandonment and to do some journaling about that and what that means. And then Tuesday, this thing happens, and I get just kicked in the gut with this awful envy situation. And by Wednesday morning, I'd sat with it for some time. I did my one little fishing lure that didn't work. That's fine. And I decided to pull a tarot card, and I really genuinely just asked this deck to please let spirit guide me in really a resolution. Sometimes when I pull a tarot card, it's really just about inspiration, maybe some journaling thoughts, maybe some collage inspo. But in this moment, I asked for relief from a really deep pain. And I had in the back of my mind this idea that I needed to return to myself, that if I was feeling this, it's about an abandonment of my own self. And the card that I pulled is the Hermit. So let's make a collage, and I'll read you the description from this book, and we'll do a little bit of deeper dive into what the hermit might mean in the way of staying true to oneself and stepping away from self abandonment and back into grounding within our own selves. So here's her description of the hermit, which is a major arcana, and it is number 9 in the major arcana. Ah, the Hermit. Like my other decks, it was the first card I created for the Guardian of the Night. This only makes sense, since this is usually the energy swirling around as anxiety and uncertainty come together to brew change. In mid March of 2020, when Seattle Public Schools announced that schools were going to be closed for an undetermined amount of time and all of the city was in virtually lockdown, the Hermit emerged to help me ease into a new normal of staying away from others, of staying in, and being alone with my thoughts. The image of a spider weaving a web that not only protects but also provides nourishment came right to mind as my daughter and I, like so many others, found ourselves stocking up and essentially nesting. Tapping into the energy of the hermit helped me find the opportunities for wisdom being on lockdown offered. Time spent indoors and not socializing made way for new ideas to flourish and the time to work on them. The hermit asks that you seek solitude, find that quiet space that welcomes insight from your higher self. The hermit energy is often lost on those who mistake being alone for loneliness or are uncomfortable sitting with only their inner thoughts. When this card appears, take time and practice the skill of achieving peace while in solitude. Once your mind is in a state of quiet, listen to that faint voice that comes through. Can you hear the guidance? The spider makes for an ideal hermit, as it is less than social creature, preferring to spend its time in the shadows. Channel this creature, known for its mysterious qualities, when it is a time to assess your growth. Are there opportunities to cast a new net or spin a new web to help you gain the desired outcome? Have patience if the results don't happen overnight, and pay attention to the vibrations, as they will become your guide. The spider symbolism for her here is patience, creativity, awareness, vibration, and connected. I made a note in this, do not abandon yourself, from the Lee Harris January 2026 reading. And I underlined some things that I'll repeat now. The hermit asks that you seek solitude and find that quiet space that welcomes insight from your higher self. Now, as I shared, a coping mechanism for me is to go outside of myself, to find validation for these really uncomfortable feelings from an outside source. And instead, what I really need to do is validate them from within, get quiet, and sit with the discomfort. And they are uncomfortable. I think that coping mechanisms really show their true colors when we use them to hide from discomfort. For me, with alcohol, it was really just about connection and fun for a long time. When it turned into something that was no longer serving me is when alcohol became a place for me to hide discomfort. My life was uncomfortable. The truth of what I had created and the level of burnout I was existing in was uncomfortable. And I chose to numb that with alcohol. And that's when it stopped being a coping mechanism that was safe and valid and started to become one that was working against me. I'd outgrown it. Another thing that she says in here is, when this card appears, take time to practice the skill of achieving peace while in solitude. That's intense for me, to sit quietly with this discomfort and just find peace with it. Allow it to wash over me. remind myself that it's okay to feel these human things, that I'm a human being. I'm not above that, nor do I need to be. And then the journaling came in as a very valid coping mechanism where it gave me an opportunity to really get clear about how true these feelings were. And one of the things that I mentioned is that I felt some envy, of course. And I asked myself, is that because it's expensive and I feel I can't afford it? Is that even true? No, you could afford it if you needed to. Freedom. Was he able to make this choice without checking in with anyone else? Maybe or maybe not. I mean, I really don't even know the answer to that. And the truth is, I'm free to do whatever I feel I need to do. My husband will express concern or disappointment in choices I make, but he wouldn't prevent me from making them. But I realized that another thing that was throwing some real discomfort at me is that, and this came from the minute the announcement came that he was making this choice, was should I do this too? And I am hyper aware of the word should when it shows up in my thoughts, in my heart, in my vocabulary. That is a big red flag that, one, the answer is no. Whatever you're shoulding about, the answer is no. Step back. But when I get the word should moving into my brain, I'm abandoning myself, because what I am now lost in is comparison. Should for me is always going to come from a place of looking at others, looking outward, not inward. And that is an abandonment of self as well. So I just really loved her reading. And it was almost funny to me. I kind of laughed out loud when I saw that it was the hermit. When I've been just reaching outward so much, this idea of reaching inward. Let's go. Um, Trust oneself. And another book that I have is a book just called Tarot: Reveal Your Past, Inform Your Present, and Predict Your Future. And it's really kind of a guidebook, how to use tarot, what the cards mean, a deeper dive into them. And I thought I'd read a little bit about the hermit from this book as well. Interpretation. When the hermit appears in a reading, it can mean that a guide figure is at hand, offering help. The querent must make an effort to connect with this guide or consciously begin a search for the truth. A second interpretation is that the questioner must voluntarily withdraw from contact with the outer world for a time to search her soul for the meaning of life. I basically fell out of my chair when I read that. Another one that is in here says that the hermit is linked to Uranus and Kronos, the god of time. The myth of these two fathers, both deposed by their sons because they refused to face up to the facts of their inevitable ends, warns us to accept the reality that all must grow old and die for new life to emerge. The death may not be a physical one, but the shedding of a life-denying idea that serves as a limitation on the spirit. And I think that letting go of these methods that we hang on to remove us from discomfort, finally moving through them and letting go, it is a death of sorts. I assure you, I went through a mourning period when I said goodbye to alcohol. That was tough. And I think there was a bit of a mourning period in my cancer days when I realized that this fishing mechanism is not working, and you just continue to hurt yourself with it and set up others for failure. And there was a grief within that. I went into a very lonely state for a brief time. Not a woe is me so much, but definitely this sensation that I'm the only person alive at this moment who is feeling this. And you know what? That might have been true, and that's okay. I mean, that is what life is. We're going to feel things that others won't or can't or don't need to. Processing them, accepting them, forgiving ourselves for them, having compassion for ourselves. It also definitely broadened my ability to be compassionate for those who cannot understand what's happening with me at any given moment. It's just not their job. It's not everybody's role to know what I feel at every moment. It's for me to sort through. And the hermit and regaining myself, stepping away from self-abandonment and back into my own grounding soul, that is the practice that comes from that. And that is the growth that comes from that. So I felt like those were really fun. The spider itself is a really interesting symbol, and we can look him up in animal speak. One of the things when I look up a card is that I'll look at the number, I'll look at the imagery, I read the description. If I need to go deeper, I'll find other books about that description, but I also will look up the animal itself and find out what some of his messaging might be. And I use all of that to guide me through my journaling as a prompt. And that is how I use the tarot for those. As far as for inspiration for the collage, I just take the overall feeling, like the hermit, not just the artwork in this particular deck, but just in general, has this kind of deep forest, dark. I can see the moon, maybe a hangnail moon or thumbnail moon. You know what I'm saying? Like a partial moon. Um, yeah, what I see immediately when I see that card is the darkness, but the beauty of darkness. Because for me, the inner self is very dark too. Not dark like menacing, but like when you turn off the lights to take a nap, right? The light would be just so distracting. It's a darkness that invites peace and quiet and solitude and introspection. And that is what that card sort of felt to me, and so that's where all of the quote unquote inspiration for the collage came from. I just shopped my own stash for moody, broody, dark woodland. I can see a lot of like the blues that are so deep blue that they almost read as black. That's really just what I pulled and then started piecing it together. So let's recap a little bit about the concept of coping mechanisms kind of devolved over time. I think that coping mechanisms are important and valuable, and there are really healthy ones like journaling. There are really healthy ones like meeting with the right friend to share an experience with and get some feedback on. I think it's important. A therapist can be a really healthy coping mechanism. I think that what happens in time is that sometimes they can devolve. So, if journaling is a healthy coping mechanism, and then we begin to start to collect journals and stationery, and then it starts to move into spending in a way that isn't healthy or safe for us. We're overspending. We're starting to feel buyer's remorse. We've kind of lost our path. It has devolved into a different kind of coping mechanism, maybe, right? Overspending, overconsumption, looking for dopamine hits through packages arriving in the mail. And so I think that even really healthy, good coping mechanisms can get away from us occasionally. And I think what the hermit asks is that when we feel those tinges, that we step back, get clear with ourselves quietly, just on our own, and really think about what that is really bringing to our lives and what it's taking away from our lives, and see if we can't recalibrate. I still will always be thankful for the opportunity to text a friend when I'm hurting, but I know now to be more cautious about the way I use that, and also why. If I'm just uncomfortable, can I find the strength to sit with that discomfort? So, yeah, I hope that that is helpful. I received a lot of really lovely feedback last week after posting that my word of the year was joy, and talking a bit about, some conflict about that in my mind a little bit. Is it okay when the world is seeing so much pain to make joy your focus? And gosh, did you guys send some beautiful quotes? And also links to a lot of other women who are speaking out about the fact that joy is their focus right now. And actually, Lee Harris talks about that a bit in his January reading as well. And I am still doing my happiness tracker, and I absolutely love it. And it does bring me a lot of joy. And one of the things I added to my happiness tracker this week, in the midst of all of this emotional stuff going on, was trust who you are. And, my happiness tracker is about little moments throughout the day that I connect with these.
with these happiness goals, like a breathing moment, a prayer moment, really stopping and taking in the nature that's around me when I'm on a walk. They're just little pops, little moments. And I added to this to trust in who you are, just a moment in the day to remind myself that I'm a human being and I'm going to have small, ugly, not wonderful feelings sometimes, and that's okay. Trust in who I am. Who I am at my heart is joyful and compassionate to myself and to others. And I'm going to have those small moments, and that's okay too. There's always something to learn from them. And they give me a great opportunity to pull out one of my favorite things on earth, which is a journal. So, how bad can that possibly be? So I'm going to share with you a quote that was sent to me from a sweet friend, Sherry. Thank you. And I just, like I said, I got so much great feedback on that concept of joy as my word of the year. And here's a quote that she sent: "No matter what, hang on to the part of you that gasps at a beautiful sunset or gets super excited about a new notebook or a freshly baked cupcake or a dog you just met on the street. Allow yourself to be regularly startled and humbled by joy." And that sums it up. It's the little things that bring me so much joy. And as a joyful person, finding joy every day, I feel like I serve the world better in that condition. So I hope you enjoyed what we had here today. It was a long one. Thanks for sticking it out to the end. And I hope you have a beautiful week. Feel free to comment. Let me know how you're doing with things. And yeah, I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time around.